this is a quick analysis of the piece Boris Through the Grapevine. Now, this is part of an arranging task that we do in Year 11. All students are given the piece Boris the Pirate, which is a sort of generic sea shanty style folk song. And students are to arrange Boris the Pirate into any number of genres or styles or combinations of genres or styles. And in this case, I have come up with an arrangement of my own. This one is inspired by Motown music, and specifically the piece or the song I Heard It Through the Grapevine by Marvin Gaye, and there was a later popular version by Creedence Clearwater Revival. And so these have combined together to create Boris Through the Grapevine, just a silly sort of name there. And so I'm going to talk you through how this arrangement works and what makes it tick. And so we're going to start with a little quick look at some dot points here. What makes Boris the Grapevine Through the Grapevine work? Number one, I think there is appropriate instrumentation chosen for the genre. So I've chosen a specific genre, Motown music, and so I've chosen instruments that suit that genre. Number two, the melody sticks very closely to the original song, which creates space for other aspects of the arrangement to shine and to come through to the listener. Something to consider is if you vary the melody or the harmony or both a tremendous amount, it's not going to be long before listeners can't recognize that this is an arrangement of an existing piece, and they're going to start to think this is a brand new piece. Often the art of a good arrangement is that the listener can tell what this piece is, but are still really sort of interested by the variations you've come up with. So in this case, I've kept the melody largely intact, which draws attention to all of the other things that I do around the piece aside from the melody. A new instrumental section has been written, and in this case, that instrumental section emulates the intro, especially from I Heard It Through the Grapevine. So if you know I Heard It Through the Grapevine, it has this intro that goes boom, bow down, boom, do boo da da down, boo down, boom. It's this kind of classic line, and so I've tried to emulate that in my piece. So I've added to the original Boris the Pirate a new section that wasn't there before. Part 4, parts are written to emulate or fit within the chosen genre. So the bass, the organ, the drum beat, the guitar, they've been written to closely resemble the kind of thing that you would hear in Motown. And part of that consideration is that the parts are written to complement each other. They're often using similar rhythms, they're leaving space for each other at other points, and generally they push in the same direction. And that's something we'll return to later. Consideration has been taken for tone, timbre, balance, and production to match the genre as well. And of course, Motown is a genre of music where the recordings themselves have a distinctive tone to them. If you hear those tones and those sounds and that particular reverb, it calls to mind Motown. And finally, this arrangement is relatively efficient. It's over in just over 2 minutes. Each section is repeated only as necessary. And this is not it is not essential that music is always efficient. Sometimes it needs to be exploratory and go through different places and moods, etc. But something you can keep in mind is the listener's stamina. How long can you really hold the attention of a listener? And sometimes, the kind of golden rule is 2 to 3 minutes before people are starting to look around for another song. And sometimes it's considered even less than that. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Let's quickly look through this piece. I'm not hoping to make this too long. Initially, we start with this I'll just play the intro to start with. Okay, so this is aiming to replicate the intro from I Heard It Through the Grapevine, and that particularly relies on the organ part, which looks like this. So these kinds of ideas, they are both harmonic and melodic at the same time. And the way that that works is that this is basically an A minor chord. We've got our A in the bass. We've got our A triad. But the upper two voices of this chord actually go on a bit of an adventure. The E walks to G through the passing note of F sharp, and the C walks to E through the passing note of D. And that creates this sound. What you're hearing is essentially the Dorian mode, but in a harmonic form. So we're visiting this F sharp. Of course, A minor should have an F natural if it was a natural minor or the Aeolian mode. But in this case, it is an F sharp, which really gives us the sense of the Dorian. At the same time, the guitar pushes in that same sort of direction. And underneath that, we have a pedal from the bass, a lot of the note A. So it's this kind of rhythmic, groovy, harmonic introduction that has a bit of a melodic feature occurring in this organ part, and it is a little bit reminiscent of I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Finally, the last detail, which is a really great detail, our singing teacher, Miss Smith, she has added some vocal ad-libs. I asked her to just sort of give us her best kind of Motown vocal ad-libs, and she did a wonderful job, and that kind of floats over the top as well. So you can hear how well her part that she came up with on the fly blends really, really nicely with the organ and the guitar parts. Really, really cool. And by the time that intro is finished, we, as a listener, we really are in the sort of Motown zone, and we are ready for the melody. The melody comes in on this instrument here, which is called a mellotron, and specifically it's the 3 violins version. Without going into the history, the mellotron was an early attempt at trying to sort of synthesize or recreate the sound of strings and vocals in a keyboard instrument. It didn't really succeed at that. It doesn't really sound like strings. It sounds like mellotron. But this mellotron sound became very popular in music of the 60s, specifically the Beatles. A song that I'm always talking about in class, Strawberry Fields Forever, uses the mellotron quite prominently. It's a great sound. In I Heard It Through the Grapevine, the piece I'm trying to emulate here, there are a lot of strings. Now, in this case, the strings don't play the melody, they play the counter melody in I Heard It Through the Grapevine. In my version, I've flipped those roles. The vocals are the counter melody, or the supplementary melody, and the main melody is taken by these mellotron parts. So they have a strings-like quality in the sense that they hold a lot of sustain, and they have a little bit of a string-like timbre, but it's not really super like strings. It's not a realistic emulation, but it is that 60s kind of mellotron sound that we hear on the Beatles. Otherwise, we have our rhythm section sort of plodding along, going through the chords. The bass line follows the chord changes. So A to C major, to G major, and then D major. So you can see there's some passing notes coming in. A, passing note up to C, passing note down to G, and then passing note down to E. So a little bit of using passing notes to create a kind of walking bass style without a full walking bass. We're still getting a lot of the root notes there. The organ does the same. So we're getting a lot of the chord there. You might have noticed that there's a tiny little turn into, I think, the G chord. So there's A minor, C, here comes a little turn into G. There's a nice little effect that you can add. All I've done is I've anticipated the note D of the G chord with the wadam, and it just, it's a little bit nicer than just regular chord stabs. And the guitar does, I'm just playing literally barred chords of each of the chord changes. Put it all together and we have the Boris the Pirate melody in a Motown style. Okay, essentially we get two A's. So these are our two A sections here. We hear Boris the Pirate melody. You can see it literally copy and pasted there. And when we hit this section, the intro is briefly revisited with some very nice vocal ad-libs. So what I've done is this intro that I've added to the original, this is not in the original, I've then brought it back for this middle section that you might call an interlude. It's not quite a bridge, but it's kind of an interlude. There's our intro with some vocal ad-libs. And then we're back to the melody. So essentially we've had A, interlude A, and now we're about to hit the B section. So now when we hit the B section, this is where the rhythm section changes. I'm just going to mute the vocal ad-libs for a second just because they are quite prominent. And I just want to hear that the melody has been shared to a different part of the ensemble. In this case, the mellotron has gone from being the melody to being the harmony. So we're just getting lush, long-held harmonies through the mellotron, and instead the organ, which once had the harmony, is now going to have the melody. So it's always nice to think about swapping ensemble roles at key moments of the songs for a different flavor. And in this case, we've gone from mellotron melodies to organ melodies, and you can see that it really takes off at this point. So there's a real lift there when the organ takes over. One last thing I'd like to add is that the rhythm section changed their groove. Previously, the bass, the Wurlitzer chords, and the drums were grooving along with a pretty steady backbeat. Cool. You can hear that there wasn't perfect timing there on the Wurlitzer, but you don't hear it in the mix. It's all good. And then when we hit this B section, they start emphasizing each beat of the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, to really change the feels from this backbeat of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. We now start emphasizing 1, 2, 3, 4, and the feel really changes. Here's our backbeat. And here comes the change of emphasis. Go. Bass. And that all combines together to really lift the piece at that juncture. Okay. Finally, I'll just restore those vocal ad-libs. So she, Miss Smith, took some wonderful vocal solo through this section that elevates it to another level once again. And then we get to the outro, and the outro is essentially the intro again. So we don't go back to the A section. So this song goes A, interlude A, B, kind of a vamp to the end. And I think it still works. I think we heard enough of the A section that we don't need to hear it again. I think that's quite an effective end. You can be the judge of whether that works or not, or whether we should have heard the A section again. But that's essentially covered all of the most important elements of the song. The harmony's there, the melody's there. It has been rearranged with this new I Heard It Through the Grapevine inspired part, and in my opinion, I think it works quite well. So what I'm going to touch on now, just to finish off, are some of the production aspects. So we've just talked about appropriate instrumentation. I've chosen instruments of the era. The melody gives us space to add other things, such as an instrumental section. The parts have been written both to emulate the genre, but also they push in the same direction. We saw that in the B section, where they started emphasizing altogether those on the beat crotchets that changed the feel of the piece. And I just want to talk now a little bit about the tone and the timbre and the production. These are the final pieces of the puzzle when we are writing music that sometimes get missed. We don't always cover them. And so we're just going to talk about that a tiny bit. Now, to start with on the drums, thankfully, GarageBand in their wisdom have added a generic kit as part of the original drum kit suite that comes with just basic GarageBand, a Motown style drum kit. And just to contrast it, this is what the same part on a regular kit would sound like. Here's the part with cymbals. And here's what the Motown kit sounds like. Now, I'm not sure if this comes through fully with the way that I'm recording, but you can actually hear that there is some reverb, and specifically a spring-style reverb, which is really particular and appropriate to the genre of the 60s and 70s that the Motown sound has. So this kind of reverberated drums that both the Beatles are known for, probably the Rolling Stones, those British invasion bands, the Animals especially, are known for that sound. And then, of course, the Motown records sound is in there as well. So this is one tone that I've chosen. Very easy choice to make. Literally, they named an instrument after the style I was trying to get. The second one is the bass. I've chosen the Liverpool bass. Now that Liverpool, if you know, that's a city in England where the Beatles came from. So they're trying to emulate that Paul McCartney bass, and they've actually drawn a picture of his kind of classic bass here. So the kind of what's a big part of this tone is that there's a very heavy emphasis on the lower range. The note dies away relatively quickly. It's quite a dull low tone with not a ton of treble and not a ton of sustain. So it's got a lot of kind of punch to it, and that is the classic kind of Beatles sound. So I know that Motown and the Beatles are not the same, but they are roughly in a similar sort of era, so it felt appropriate to go there. I've added a Wurlitzer, an electric piano, which was popular in that time. And the organ, of course, which is popular from that time and earlier as well. Now, those are instrumentation choices, but one thing that I have done, which you can access through the smart controls if you're using GarageBand, is that I have actually run both the organ and the Wurlitzer through an amp simulator. This can be found in the plugins chain down at the bottom of the screen, just circling it with my mouse. So if you click through here, you can find all of these extra plugins and features that are kind of hidden in the background. And the virtual amps, or the amp designer, is found here. And literally, it lets you look at the kind of amp that you've chosen. I've gone for the British combo. There are actually many, many different ones you can choose, and you can do really fun stuff, such even change the microphone placement. There's a lot of detail, and these are the tones that I've gone for. Now, specifically, I've added quite a bit of gain, which is likely to create what's called distortion, the kind of gritty sound that's associated with rock and roll and soul music and music of that kind of era. And these are my EQ settings with quite a bit of bass and a middling kind of level of treble. Importantly, I've also added reverb. So if I turn my amp off, which I can do like this by pressing this on and off button, this is what the organ sounds like. And And this is what it sounds like with it on. Off, on. And to my ears, that much closer resembles the sound of that kind of Motown era. It's exactly the same with the Wurlitzer. This has gone through the amp simulator as well. I've changed the settings slightly. You might recall that I've changed those a little bit, but you will hear that sound. Here is it with it on, and here is it off. It's a huge change. This sounds great, but it sounds too clean for the era. These are the subtle tone and production choices that you can make with programs like Logic, like GarageBand, like Pro Tools, that take a piece that is working and really, really make it work by accessing some of the tone and the aesthetic choices that emulate the eras that you're kind of hoping to go for with your arrangements. So I'll leave it there. Thank you if you've watched it all the way through to the end, but this was an analysis of Boris Through the Grapevine and how we have taken Boris the Pirate and arranged it for a completely different genre. I hope you've taken a lot from this, and I hope you have a lot of fun with this arranging task. All right, thank you.